Hello, this is Mars on Life. As always, I'm Ryan Mancini, and I'm joined with me.
Sebastian Shug, as always. 9 episodes in, and we still haven't fixed this audio sort of like start recording hiccup. I don't know if you heard it, but I definitely
I
heard
don't,
it.
I don't think I did. I have received feedback from at least a few sharp-eared listeners about the audio kind of feedback recording and how I sound very slurred. I can remind everyone that I am sober to a large degree, or at least I have been in the last several episodes. So if there's any slurring, that's on Skype's end, not mine.
Very,
Um,
very true, honestly.
so although I do keep cursing myself every time on a Wednesday when we record. Which, by the way, you can listen to this episode on Friday. We're officially moving fully onto Fridays this upcoming Friday. So, of course, today is Passover. So by the time you're listening to this, it'll be Good Friday.
There you go.
Um,
Only thing is, I'm
but
Catholic, so.
yeah,
But anyway, just wanted.
do we want to give a quick shout out to all those platforms that people can find us?
Yes, definitely. So it took some doing. It really did. But in order, aside from Anchor, obviously, we'd like to give a few quick shout outs to Castbox. I believe it's. Hold on. Let me just
I
get the
get
list.
the. I was gonna say I got the list right in front of me.
Oh, all right. Do it up then.
So yeah, we have Castbox. You can also find us on Radio Public,
There we go.
Stitcher, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Overcast FM, Spotify, and my personal favorite, Apple Podcasts. Yeah, so we have a little bit of news. I guess a little bit of quick news that we can talk about for a few minutes. That you were interested in bringing up right off the bat.
Yes. So if every single Twitter pundit, uh, if every si- if every single Twitter pundit and news source didn't quite give it away, Bernie Sanders has officially called it quits. Now, the troglodytes on social media would say otherwise and say that his campaign is just stopping at a certain point, and other kinds of banter that fit 280 characters. But I think we kind of just have to meet at brass tacks here and kind of just analyze whether or not this is even going to be continuing at all from his platform. I kind of wanted to see what you thought about it, considering.
My overall take, and I think this is something to really consider when it comes to looking at the way that this election has turned out, but also looking ahead at anything that you could remotely call voter turnout in November, because it really I don't think will be called that. I think in a lot of ways Bernie decided to end his campaign not because of losing momentum or losing support or people that think, oh well, he has to see that the writing's on the wall because Uncle Joe is beating him. I think it had more to do with the fact that arguably if Bernie kept running, it would have resulted in more people dying. And what I mean by that is the DNC and Joe Biden's campaign were both basically complicit with whatever states that decided to have primaries since, you know, the U.S. started taking coronavirus seriously, which was pretty damn late, if you believe our intelligence community for any reason. Apparently, Trump knew about coronavirus as far back as November. But, you know, that's just it, is that Biden nor any Democratic Party officials were telling voters to stay in. And not every state is like our golden state of California, where you can have a mail-in ballot. And so that makes it all the more dangerous if you're really anybody. Like that's just it. Is that if you're capable of catching coronavirus, you're putting yourself at risk just to either stick it to Bernie or stick it to Trump. And I think there's something about that I get it, and I think in a sad way it's a reversal of the old Star Trek maxim of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, because you know you can save a few lives now, but just know that dropping out to save those few lives now is going to cost us big time in the years to come. Mm-hmm. And I'm not totally ruling out that Biden somehow can't win, but I give him about as low of a chance of winning as most people were giving Trump of winning back in 2016. The way I see it, April 8th, 2020 is the day Trump won re-election, in my opinion. Wow. So I personally think that that's something that we all need to contend with now. And
so in a lot of ways, I don't want to say lost hope, but you kind of just come to that conclusion and accepted it, as hard as it sounds.
Well, I think, and this is me speaking as an existentialist, I do kind of believe in the whole concept of the absurd, and I feel like this is something that we were waiting for all along, which is sad, but at the same time, whenever I was around groups of people that said, oh, it's not a matter of if Bernie wins, it's when Bernie wins, mm-hmm. I would chime in and say, yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, they had those same, and I don't mean to cut you off here, but they had the same discussion points back in 2016 when it was Hillary and Trump. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And even on election night, it's a matter of, when is a fireworks show going to come on? And when she canceled it, it was like, oh, it's in the bag. So,
right.
I mean, that was just sort of I think that was just sort of an acceptance that night 4 years ago. Here we are in April in 2020, and we're just sort of accepting it now. I'm not saying that either candidate is fit for the job, but
let's face it.
I think people would have definitely preferred to see Bernie over Biden any day.
Because I had a lot of people this morning who messaged me, and they were like, oh, can you believe this? Or, they would ask me, is this true? Or, in a twisted way, it was reminiscent of the night Trump won, where, my roommate at the time had to ask me, I think I mentioned this on a previous episode. My roommate had asked me, did Trump still win? And I said, I don't know. Let me check my phone. And it's almost like that same disbelief was among people that had neither canvassed for him, probably didn't volunteer for him, and they probably weren't as much of a political junkie as I am. And I think that was what made it very interesting, is that I got average Joes reaching out to me. And this should be testament to how effective of a campaign Bernie ran. But when you've got people that are rather non-political reaching out to the one Bernie person they know with genuine fear or frustration in their message saying, is this true? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't understand how that doesn't resonate with the quote-unquote average Democratic voter. And I just, if anything, it just boggles my mind whenever I watch, because if you watch how, legacy publications and news websites will touch on Joe Biden, it's always a pull quote from him, or it's always a quote that makes him sound coherent. But then you actually sit down and watch some of these interviews, and it's like, he can't even get the year right for the Spanish flu. He gets it wrong twice in an interview. And he thinks he's so great because he just corrected himself. And it just starts getting more and more aggravating from there. And I think the last thing you have to think about is, with a Biden administration, it's going to be about as ineffective as Obama's was. Because Obama's administration, all he had to do was put a nice face on it, and people loved him. But he had a cabinet full of people that knew exactly what they were doing, and nobody batted an eye except all the cranky people who watch Fox News religiously. Now, that's problematic because that basically gave that administration enough free time to, bail out the banks, protect the Bush administration, and carry on business as usual. Now, after 8 years of what we had with Bush, and then the fallout that we're still suffering from out of the 2008 recession, Obama arguably made a lot of things much worse for people, especially middle class people, and to a certain degree, helping with that kind of corporatization of the arts that has made it so problematic for anybody with a radical voice or anybody with a real pulse on society from getting very far. And I just think it's people are so frustrated with how Trump's handling coronavirus, and it's like, well, look, Trump doesn't know what he's doing, but he also has a team that doesn't know what they're doing. With Biden, he won't know what he's doing, but he will have a team that knows what they're doing, and we will all be in pain from it to some extent. So I kind of look at it as, it's even just thinking about November is, it's the last thing on my mind right about now. And, since we're getting to the 15-minute mark, I'll wrap up here where I say, it's hard.
A few minutes, yeah. Yeah, no, listeners already know.
Yeah, well, if anything, it's hard to fathom debates. It's hard to fathom the conventions. I mean, the Democratic convention got pushed back to the week before the Republican convention. I kind of look at it like, arguably, were Joe Biden to amp up his fundraising and to amp up his campaign and to amp up his public image, then sure, maybe he'll win. If he debates Trump, I don't think he wins. If he doesn't debate Trump, this is the thing. This is where it starts getting into all the probability with an election plus that monkey wrench known as the pandemic. And I think that's the thing where I start becoming Yoda and, I start saying things like, clouded this boy's future is. So, which regrettably is from a prequel film. But anyway.
You secretly love them. You wouldn't have shit memes if the prequels didn't exist.
Hey, you know what? All I can say, shout out to Chapo Trap House's commentaries for the Star Wars prequels. It's gold, Jerry. Gold. So, and on that note, I guess on to the topic for this week's episode. This was something we almost touched on last week, but I figured before we get to our first sort of big anniversary episode with episode 10, I thought, given the timeliness, this seemed like an interesting subject, especially for two avid readers like you and I.
Oh, boy. Okay. So, you know what? Actually, you could probably introduce this a lot calmer than I can, because this subject, and I was even going to pinpoint, tack onto that, not only avid readers, but avid writers as well. And with this subject, the subject being publishing, I'm just going to clear the air here. The elephant in the room is I want to say sort of the correlation between indie publishers as well as, I want to say, indie author expectations. Now, you know what? I'll just let you go into that. And
well, I from my understanding with the sort of main point of the topic is the publishing industry, and and granted this also ties in with booksellers as well, but yes. It's tying together the book industry, for the lack of a better term, and what kind of state of funk that it's in response to both coronavirus, but also the economy. And to some degree, it's similar to our film discussion, where at first when I was doing research into it, my initial fear was no more books are being printed, which I don't think is the case. As far as I know, I mean, people still have books set to come out this year. It's more like the book tours, the book signings, all of the big public events will not be happening. Which in a lot of ways it sucks, because that means that, whatever money these books are going to make, all that promotion is gone. And so, you'll have publishers as well as authors that are probably going to have to rely, as some people so bittersweetly put it, they'll have to pretty much rely on their social media fan base in terms of actually picking up said books. But I think, the story also touches on, because there's a great story about it in the LA Times, which I sent to you, that touches on not only the publishing industry, which of course you and I have talked about in regards to American Dirt, but also just how this is going to impact booksellers in general, which can be the indie bookstores like the Last Bookstore rather, in downtown LA, or it could mean something like Barnes and Noble, and of course Amazon.
So what we're looking at is just a strange disconnect between, people who actually want to get into the publishing sphere, people who actually want to publish something. Where do they go to in order to do so? Not only to sell it, but in order to engage an audience and grow their audience as well. Now, I know we had differing opinions on this, and sort of after doing a little bit of digging on my part and you collecting your notes on your part, this may be the first topic that maybe we actively disagree with one another on. And I know that we're both speaking from two incredibly different standpoints, because as someone who's been published as a journalist versus as someone who's been published as an author, that audience retention rate is huge, right?
Yeah.
And that audience share rate is equally as large, because it brings in customers and clients and new readers that we would have never expected to showcase our work to in the first place. Sorry, my argument is that as much as I love to proclaim about being that big fish in a small pond and really sort of emphasizing yourself as being different to stand out amongst the crowd, there's a lot of other big fish in that pond as well, pioneering themselves to these indie bookstores. And in a non-shoe-fisted attempt to promote them, even though we're not sponsored by them, we'd like to give a quick shout-out to bookshop.org. Now,
yes. Yeah.
So this story had fallen into our laps, whereas this independent bookstore, bookshop.org, houses indie authors, much like others that you may find online. It's not so much in the realm of boutique and alternative publishing, but it is sort of a collective base for all of them to.
Well, it's they sell a lot more than just indie authors. Like I was looking up, up several authors, which by no means. Most of the people I read from are unfortunately not indie, but for example, they've got a whole pandemic reading collection that incorporates books like Albert Camus' The Plague, which by no means is indie, as well as I looked up some of my other favorite authors like Gore Vidal, and they had a ton of his books. So it's if anything, Bookshop, they're more like an alternative to Amazon right about now.
What I noticed is that aside from Amazon, which I'll go into that, Bookshop is not a publishing platform. You cannot publish books through their site. However, you can find books through their site that have been published through other means. And
they're like a mediator between
exactly
bookstores and the buyer. They're they can either forward you to a bookstore that has the book you're looking for, or you can just buy it from the website, but then that money can go to a bookstore, which
Right.
I think is brilliant. Like that's where that was part of why I sent that article to you, because I was like, dude, look, it's a book website that's actually helping bookstores. Jeff Bezos isn't even doing that to save the publishing industry.
Now, here's where my other part of my opinion comes in. And
Okay.
allow me to kind of morally, or should I say immorally, grandstand on my soapbox for a second, because I just kind of want to let you, as well as other listeners, what kind of the life of an independent author really is. So when you're faced with putting a manuscript out there, it's all ready to go, you typically want to try to capture as many people as possible with your book, in the chance that, it'll be sold. And I mean this all sarcasm. My tone of voice is sarcasm, in case you couldn't tell. But really, when you publish a book, you're not only intending to gain an audience from it, you also want to have some sort of monetary compensation for it. Whereas Bookshop's noble efforts of giving you back 10% in not even royalty fees, but affiliate marketing, which is even more so of pennies in the bucket when it comes to people actually buying your books. And again, this is in no way demeaning of bookshop.org's business model. They have a fantastic business model where purchasing a book through affiliate marketing helps other bookstores. Amazon does not. But for the independent author who wants to get their book out there to the public with a 35 to 70% royalty retention rate, and with an online database that's huge, I don't see a problem in utilizing their platform for a little bit of notoriety's sake. Now, would I do this throughout my entire life, utilizing their platform to get, let's say, not only my books, but the people that I work with, my clients' books out there? Yes, because it is their choice to do so. And this is in no way me shoe-fisting my independent publishing company as well. But it's just a matter of the level of exposure that people want. And
Right.
I suppose through bookshop.org that is possible. But then again, like I said, it's not a publishing platform. You would have to publish your book somewhere else for it to appear on their site anyway. So is it good to support online independent bookstores? Of course. But is it effective in, garnering that author profile that people are frantically searching for when they write and put stuff on the internet? Unfortunately not. And that's where Amazon, takes the lead in that regard. Because when it comes to Amazon's KDP service, the Kindle Direct Publishing, the DRM, the digital rights management, that can be checked either yes or no. And by checking no, pro tip, you can publish it to other distributors, such as Google, which is, again, what we're trying to do with our podcast, which will make it show up in Google search results. So is it bad to immorally grandstand on a soapbox for sake of getting your name out there? It's Machiavellian, sure, maybe, but it does get the job done in order to gain an audience. And I think people really struggle with that personally when it comes to putting their work out there. They want to support the underdogs. They really do. But I feel like in the world of publishing, unless you get picked up by a literary agent, it's not going to happen like it used to. It's not going to be a matter of Lee Israel getting picked up and then having her work be something that just carries on throughout her life, because it didn't carry on throughout her life. She ended up being a forger. So I can understand in some ways that it benefits others as well. But if you're going into it for the money, which unfortunately a lot of authors do, and especially during this financial period, a lot of authors are probably forced to do more so than ever, I wouldn't say it's a very viable means. And that's my 2 cents on it. Now, I'll step back. You stand
Well,
up.
it's interesting because I think I realize where we diverge, and that's the fact that you're looking at it, and I love this because you're looking at it more from the point of view of the producer of new books or just books in general. I'm looking at it more as the consumer because
Yeah,
for
and
me,
I would love to have people buy my books in bulk and just have it pay for my bills and pay for my taxes and everything. But realistically, in the beginning, you want quantity over quality. That's the way it
right.
goes because you're going to have a lot of shitty work. I'm sorry. That is not going to go noticed until that one thing is eventually noticed.
Great way that kind of ties in with kind of my very negative view of books, or at least my negative outlook when it comes to books in the future. Um, and that's largely because now I'm not one of those readers where I stick by the American canon, or I'm not reading from John Steinbeck or, regularly reading 1984. No. My much like the title to our first episode, my reading it's a bit eclectic as you see. And and when I look at the book and publishing and author, just that the entire industry, it to me is the definition of oversaturation, because when you do have a world where you have a lot of people that they want to write, they can write, the fact of the matter is you start reaching a level where there's just way too much, and
Oh,
the days of being a successful author now compared to what they were even 60 years ago, there's no comparison.
oh yeah. I mean, you have to look at this in a matter of, oh, well, Amazon publishes everything, but look at it this way. Amazon fucking publishes everything. So of course you're going to
Well,
get that.
they'll sell. That's the thing, is they'll
Yeah.
sell just
They'll
about
sell.
anything. And I think,
Right.
and that's the danger that the publishing industry is in right now, because we talked about it with American Dirt, that there's a level of maybe you could call it passive racism in the publishing industry, and there's definitely a lack of accountability with some of the stuff that does get published into book form. I kind of look at it like there's a lot of stuff that gets published that's just wrong, and that could
Oh,
either be
yeah.
factually wrong or just the content is so poor, either
There
because
is a
it's
lot.
racist or it's poorly written or whatever it may be, that it's like, it's like the line from Nacho Libre, get that corn out of my face. Like that's the realization you hit.
There is a lot of, should I say shit, but again, I don't want to come across as that guy where, everything I produce is fucking encased in gold and I have King Midas's touch when it comes to picking up a pen and writing a book. But and I'm faulty of this myself, because in the air of political incorrectness for the sake of humor, I have experimented in that. But you know
Yeah.
what?
Well,
But see,
yeah.
that's the funny thing, that sells as well. So as political correctness does. And the thing I kind of like about Amazon in regards to genre specificity, there we go, is that there are a multitude of genres that you can classify your book under
Oh
the
yeah.
under the metadata. There's about 75 plus categories. So in regards to categorizing your book and what audience it'll go to when someone searches up your name, that's already done for you. And I think the whole
Yeah.
streamlined process of doing so is it's just entirely favorable to someone who just wants to, all right, books out.
Yeah. Well, and
Uh,
so but the way I kind of look at how this industry is so warped, and now mind you, your average American is not a copious reader like
no.
you and I are. I mean, by the end of this month, I'll have read 3 or 4 books, and that's more. And mind you, I would have done that even without the quarantine and without coronavirus. but it also ties into what your average American is looking for. And I think that's just it, is that the way people are now with books is so part and parcel with the oversaturation. This is where you start getting the people that'll read, books that are suspenseful. And they want to read books that are suspenseful because it takes them out of their reality and puts them into a world that terrifies them, or it gets under their gills and they love it.
Yeah.
And that could be horror, that could be crime, that could be some kind of espionage thriller. I mean, the books of those genres are 9 times out of 10 the kinds of books that you regularly see people bring with them, whether they're on the bus, on an airplane, on vacation. And to me, it's never made any damn sense until it finally did. And mind you, it was only a brief amount of time that it didn't make any sense, and it was in a moment out of sheer not immaturity, but just I was at a young enough age where I was like, how are people reading such garbage when there's a lot of really great stuff they could read? Oh, this is why. The standards for your average American reader have gotten so low since what they, might have been at one point in history. This ties into with where people get their history from. In the 2000s.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, you can also take into account that people's tastes have indeed shifted in regards to maybe what they find interesting. And at least a lot of what I've seen with that shift has been the shift from like suspense to maybe like absurdist suspense. So the markets for genres are getting more and more niche, as I like to put it.
Yeah.
They're looking for something in specific, and when it comes to big box what am I saying? Big box outlets, like online outlets that just sort of shovel out this, if anyone can do it, anyone can do it.
Right.
Where out of this heap, you're going to find something that speaks to you in such a way.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's been me probably every time I've gone on to Amazon, which is, or at least it was for a number of years, where a subject would pop into my mind, and it was typically related to something that I'm normally focused on, like American history. Basically gave birth to that thinking, or at least when it came to like history, for example, that led to a renaissance in the early 2000s of these new history books that were meant to be the most factual retellings of our early history, but also they're books that still have that resounding American spirit that we've kind of gotten rid of in the 20 years since. And that's largely because for as many times as you could write, an 800-page biography or even a little pamphlet biography about Thomas Jefferson, you still can't hide the fact that he was the man who owned people as property. And there's no demystifying, or rather, there's no mystifying that. Like, this was a guy who owned humans as, a form of chattel. And mind you, that's the sort of, and this is where it gets kind of political, the sort of liberal affirmation of institutions where, yes, the revolution didn't really do any good for people of color or women, but it freed our country from England. Or, it's that kind of mentality that you get with things like, sometimes you get it with activist groups. Sometimes you largely see it from the Democratic Party. But
it's the kind of action that spawns titles like ours without breaking some eggs.
So, well, it's kind of like,
I mean,
and then on top of that, so you have people that they want to read suspense, they want to read the affirmation of the institutions that maintain us as a society, like history or, I don't know, the Supreme Court. And then you start getting the people that they're looking for guidance for their own personal dilemmas, which is how you get, people that want to read books about, kind of moral support and kind of like, I don't want to see a therapist, but I'm going to read this book about, why I'm tough. And I think that that's problematic too, because that frankly tells me that our healthcare system is garbage, and you have a lot of people that need to seek professional help, not, read Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah. If you want to look at the uber conservatist side of that, it can be a matter of, oh, well, if we're going to profiteer off of it by selling these shitty books,
and,
well,
I kid you not, you're bringing up my next point, which is that like every conservative with an audience has a book, and it's like,
yeah,
hey, why do we need to read Candace Owens' book? I mean, get real. And and that ties in with a real identity crisis within just the whole field of books, which is, at one point, not to sound like grandpa for a second, but within the last century, there was this idea of a master of letters, or, the great American novel, that was something that was kind of like a rallying cry in the United States of, kind of showing off our own kind of ingenuity compared with the rest of the world. Mind you, this was pre-globalization, so pre-neoliberal free market capitalism. And so, you had people like, I mentioned him earlier, Gore Vidal, Norman Mailer, Philip Roth, the guy who wrote Plot Against America, Kurt Vonnegut. You had a whole series of people, Susan Sontag. You had a whole fleet of people that were, mind you, they were intellectuals, but these were people that were like the best and brightest, and they could really spin a yarn, whether it was about history, gender, politics, science fiction, philosophy.
I'd say in Kurt Vonnegut's case, satire, which it's funny that you bring it up, because he's one of my biggest inspirations to write satire. Whereas, it's not all intended to be funny. It's intended to be made fun of for the sake of analysis.
Exactly. Oh. And by the way, him and Gore Vidal, I can't believe I've never told you this. Him and Gore Vidal were actually close friends. Yeah. But this was also something we touched on with regards to American Dirt, where people were referring to it as the new great American novel. Now, that's problematic because, and once again, this kind of shows kind of the dumbing down I see, frankly, with books, where you have an industry that it wants to thrill you, it wants to give you misleading information, and it wants to medicate you. And on top of that, it wants to whitewash the world for you. And frankly,
I mean, that definition
that
right
terrifies me.
That definition right there just kind of encapsulates Catcher in the Rye for me. If you had a little bit of that pretentiousness, it would have been spot on. And, I'm not saying that every great American novel has to be a great American novel, but
right.
They can't all be zingers. Okay.
Oh, of course. I mean, Hunter S. Thompson, literally, he hinged a lot of his writing career outside of journalism on writing the next great American novel, and he arguably did, except the book he intended to be the great American novel ended up getting pushed totally to the side and was not published for another almost half century, with a little help from Johnny Depp of all people. So, and I think that's just it, is America, the United States is not what it was when, something like Grapes of Wrath was written. That was considered, the great American novel, or the Great Gatsby, and I think because we're such a different country now more than ever before, if anything, it's about looking towards the publishing industries, or not the publishing industry. Well, how do I put this? It's about looking at the publishers, meaning these publishing houses, and thinking to yourself, okay, we're in economic free fall, and the publishing industries, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to lose they're kind of like the film industry or the production companies, where they're going to lose a crap ton of money due to this depression we're about to jump into. And that's something that's going to make or break some of the smaller, like a couple recent books that I bought directly from the publisher website because I wanted to help those companies. I'd rather help people that are publishing great material by respectful artists, respectful authors, rather than whatever publishes most of Brian Kilmeade from Fox News, most of his history stuff.
You can definitely look at it as either, the relationship between, sort of the author and the publisher and who you want to support, or the topic you were saying about like it could either make or break. That depends on what that publisher is publishing, right? Now, if you have a publisher that absolutely has, I don't want to say zero quality control, but is very lax about what the company represents, if it's just sort of a jack of all trades, master of none scenario where we'll accept any manuscript, which for all intents and purposes,
and that's conservative publishing outlets, if I may say so. I mean, that's
and I don't mean to kind of classify myself in that regard where I say that I don't do that, because I do that. And
right.
I'm not saying that I do that because of my own moral beliefs of, I'm just going to not have any fucking quality control when it comes down to the publishing process. But it's because legitimately people can't afford to either get out there and submit their books to these boutique or alternative publishing services that cost an arm and a leg just to send the manuscript, where you will never make that money back in royalties. Okay?
Right.
So it's either you sort of publish everything that comes to your doorstep and pray that one of them becomes the next great American novel, if you so happen to care about that, or solidify yourself as the next Ed Wood of publishing and have every book be shitty.
Well, and I think that's where it kind of comes into sort of a radical idea of mine in terms of what could happen. Because, I do follow people that
what could happen in again, I don't mean to cut you off again, but in the conservative publishing where you can publish anything, you've opened up so many more doors, as in, hey, these are different revenue streams, because a percentage does have to come back to the publisher. So if you have all these books out there at once, and even a fraction of them sell passively, which is, I feel, a lot of the reason why people want to go into bookmaking in the first place, is that income that 24/7 it will generate, no matter who, where, and how that sale is made.
Right. But I think that kind of the radical territory that I kind of start wading in, where I look to the future, I look at journalists or artists of any kind that are in the middle of writing a book as we speak, or they've completed a book, where I kind of look at 2020 as this could be like the final year of the book, where, and as much as, I always look forward to books by people that I admire and I respect. I certainly look forward to, I've mentioned both of them multiple times on the show, but like Ta-Nehisi Coates, Valeria Luiselli, those are people that I cannot wait until they have another book out. But I kind of look at the book industry as being arguably in the worst shape out of any industry, minus probably the journalism industry, going into this depression, where I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Yeah, it might ultimately lead to the deaths of a lot of great publishing outlets, but let's not forget the fact that there are so many books out there, and there are also so many great books that already exist that, and this is arguably detrimental and counterproductive to the whole point of our show, but there is that part of me that's like, well, then just let it all die, because because
you also have to take into account a book or a publisher is only as great as how you can market it. And, if you're going to have sort of the attitude of this is the year of the end of the book, books don't always have to exist in physical format. And I think the shift to both digital as well as audiobook format, because let's face it, people having the attention span of a gnat is
Yep.
also very profitable because people don't even want to read. So
Yeah.
why not just read it for them?
Right. Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, it's
now I'm not
and
saying,
mind you,
you know,
that's a smart way of doing it. I just think that, you know, we're at a point now where arguably Americans have now more time in the world now than ever to read. I guess my biggest problem, and mind you, and this is the thing, and this is of course for our listeners to realize, which is, all art is subjective. So as much as I paint doom and gloom about books, I'm not here to say stop buying books. That's almost blasphemous of me to say that. So it's kind of like, I guess if anything, I'm speaking as one of those people where I already know, the people that I would want to keep following, or even the, publishers that I'd want to help. Whether, I recently bought there's a new history book coming out about Los Angeles in the 1960s by Verso. Verso has been such an outstanding publishing, you know, company that I want to help them out, and I want to see them past this nightmare that we're in. And I mentioned about Miriam Gerba's book Mean. I bought that through Coffee House Press, which published the book. So it's kind of like we can't rely off of the publishing industry to survive on their own. And we certainly can't rely on Jeff Bezos to save it, even though the guy makes $9 million an hour.
No, of course.
But
It's going
if
to be
anything,
it's going to be the combined efforts of authors and publishers alike, because a publisher cannot exist without the author and vice versa. So I'm not saying that we're going to all get up on our soapboxes to such a height where we're just going to tackle Jeff Bezos to the ground. That's not going to happen. But if you can find ways to usurp that sort of outlet into benefiting independent authors, I'm not saying go pro Amazon or or no Amazon, but I'm
right,
saying that if you can use these platforms to elevate yourself to a space where, hey, I'm for independent bookstores, even though I'm juxtaposing it by being on this pretentious platform, as Amazon likes to portray it as, it can also benefit.
yeah,
It's a very Robin Hood approach. I'll give you that.
yeah,
However, I think that it is, sort of morally justifiable in not only getting your book out there, and I sound like such a broken record when I say this, but not only getting your book out there, but getting it noticed to further independent booksellers, publishers, and especially bookshop.org. Sorry, I just wanted to say I was a little bit skeptical when I read this article, because when you handed it to me, it was a matter of, oh, another one. Because this isn't the first time this has happened, and this isn't going to be the last time.
right.
I actually recently got in contact with one of their representatives. Who
Okay,
again, this is not some sort of ham-fisted attempt at advertising, but we do support bookshop.org.
oh yeah,
Representative Sarah High and I were in a discussion about, essentially how this works in the sense of, hey, we're in a pandemic. I hate to be so blunt about it, but what are the royalty rates for, essentially struggling authors who
yeah,
find the books on the site? Through this, I found that it's not a publisher, as I stated before, but it does work in a sense to affiliate marketing. Whereas your books, you will receive 10% commission, and the other 10%, you'll receive 20% commission, 10% which will go to other independent bookstores. As an affiliate, you will earn 10% in affiliate revenue, while another 10% of all your sales will go to benefiting indie bookstores from the U.S. We've distributed solely by Ingram at the moment, which, from personal experience, so have I. I'm not sure if Ingram Spark have shut down their their publishing platform. I remember it was a very brick and mortar system.
Okay.
So essentially, she attached these how-to guides on how to set up your affiliate bookstore. You add books of your choosing to the market, your market, quote unquote, and whenever someone buys it, you receive that little bit of commission. Now, what kind of interested me about that is it doesn't necessarily have to be your book. It could be any book that if someone happens to buy through your marketplace specifically, you will receive that income, which I found it kind of strange. Even in the scummiest of scummy Amazon sewer holes, whenever you buy a book from there, it'll go directly to who published it.
Right.
From here, though, it kind of seems like you're, and again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong in either whatever platform we have that engages the audience outside of just speech to sound. If this is what happens in affiliate marketing, I'm a little bit confused as to how it works.
Right.
And if that was the case, I would just pick every single great American novel and put it in my bookshelf in the hopes that someone would get it from my bookshelf, right?
Yeah.
Amazon KDP and other publishing platforms online at least allows you to set up a payment profile when someone orders it. But
Right.
Sarah I was very nice about it. She helped me set it up. And again, not sponsored. However, I do encourage you to all set up affiliate marketing programs if you happen to have your own books out there. I've done it myself, and now we wait, in essence. So.
Yeah, and I think too that if there's any kind of silver lining in all this, where the different publishing arms kind of either they totally crumble or they just begin to falter, I think people should hopefully take some kind of pride, if people are still reading, should hopefully take some pride in whatever bookshops are still available to them. I mean, I know there's an indie bookstore relatively close to where I live. I kind of look at it like, rather than hound over whatever new material out there that might pique your interest about, I don't know, really sticking it to, the Clintons or something, I guess if anything, try and seek out the kind of stuff that maybe you could teach yourself something, or take advantage of a pre-existing IP and something you've never even touched on and completely immerse yourself in it. So, basically what I'm saying is that, if you fear a blackout of books, then just remember there are still billions of books out there that you could go out and search through and find and buy and read and then put it on your shelf and then read again. It's not like we're in uncharted territory, no question, but it's not like it needs to be all doom and gloom. I mean, and mind you, I say that as somebody who, right now, I mentioned it, that I was looking forward to reading it, looking forward to the movie, and you know what? So far, I'm liking Dune by Frank Herbert. It's definitely got some Star Wars and Harry Potter kind of vibes to it, but, this is a book that's been around since 1965. I think there's something special about what people could do right now in finding the kinds of books that already exist, picking them up, and enjoying the hell out of them. I guess if anything, I don't fear the death of the book, because it just seems farcical, but at the same time, if it gives us a moment to look at ourselves in the mirror, it's not like the film industry where we can expect the big blockbuster movies that you and I aren't going to see. We can expect those to come out.
Right.
I'm not worried that I'm not going to get a hold of John Bolton's tell-all memoir about what it was like working for Trump. I just don't care. And I think, if there's people out there that are genuinely concerned about, I need to know what the United States Senate needed to know, then you got bigger problems, my friend.
There really is no way to go but forward. when it comes to this, and it's
Hmm.
not like I'm looking at it from a glass half empty perspective of, people can't do it in terms of writing the next great American novel. I do think that this quarantine is going to give us all more opportunity to do so, like you stated.
Yeah.
However, let's keep our wits about us here. I mean, people have already been profiting off of this shit for far too long. So,
Well, and I think
not
that's
the
the
fire.
danger. That's a danger that we have, and arguably that could give us another American Dirt episode where somebody does take advantage. I mean, and that's just it. The situation we're in, obviously, it's a touchy subject, but then again, Janine Cummins should have realized that when she wrote American Dirt, writing about, uh, refugees coming to the United States. It's a touchy subject where people could die. And I think, you know, if the idea from somebody who wants to write about this era just wants to write, I think that's just it, is that people forget that the whole concept of the great American novel is not about making profit. It's about, kind of like what we want to do with the show, which is reflect back on society. And I think, you know, John Steinbeck wasn't bragging about how much money he made when he wrote the books that he wrote. Um, but by that same token, I mean that's basically what the publishing industry has become. It's not so much about writing something, for the good of the country or for the good of our people, but it's about what's going to be a bestseller. And there's something unfortunate about that, but obviously, if this is the death knell of how the publishing industry works, then I hope that's the kind of revision that it gets if and when we ever come out of the pickle that we're in. So, it's kind of like all art, it's like what I said earlier, all art is subjective. If you have an author or a group of authors that you love and you love reading their work, by all means, pick. I'm the kind of person that believes in that kind of, you know, do your homework, do your research, and read as much of their material as you want. Um, how it feeds into your life is how you deal with it. But I think, hopefully this is a time period that gives people a little bit of moment of pause when it comes to what they consume in terms of reading material.
I honestly thought we were going to get a little bit more heated than that, but I'm glad that we kept it civil, and I'm glad that we kind of came to a mutual agreement. Whereas, at the end of the day, I used to think, it's funny, I used to think it doesn't matter how you get your art out there or your work out there, so long as you get it out there. It wasn't even for sake of profit.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I used to sort of have this, vanity cloak where, you know, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this because I want to say that I published a book, I wrote a book. But
Right.
it's it's funny how you mature with age. Funny. Ironic.
Yeah. Well, if anything, or at least the way I've kind of reconfigured myself, we talked about this in our first episode where my intake of like political reading is probably going to be very muted in terms of new stuff because nothing seems to change and everything's just so depressing now that it's kind of like, why do I need to pick up another expose on the Trump White House?
Hmm.
And I think that's where you can find value in reading from history. And on top of that, this was a line that I think I addressed it once in regards to my new outlook on books, which is the Christopher Hitchens approach, which is read from people that make you think why you bother, and people that you read their work and it makes you. It's basically like this is why you write, and in our case, it's like this is why I create content of any kind. And if anything, it's meant to be a kind of stimulant. It's meant to be something that's going to keep me going and keep me creating stuff. Does it always relate? Not really, but I think it's certainly something that I always have kind of in the back of my mind whenever I'm creating anything new. I always have something kind of on tab in case I need it. Like Dune, which is sitting right next to me. So they haven't had Worm sign yet, so that'll be exciting.
Time will tell. Time will tell.
So speaking of time, we are sadly coming to the end of the show.
Again, quick shout out to our not our sponsors, but our hosts for Mars on Life. If we could just run down the list one more time, thank each and every one of them.
Well, actually, and then another thing as well that I want to give a quick shout out to. We've talked about this a few times recently about the Los Angeles Artist Census. Recently, Tatiana, who sort of controls that Instagram page, recently shared a link for people to help out artists in absolutely dire need. That link is artistrelief.org, and this is a way to support artists during the COVID-19 crisis, kind of paraphrasing from the post. A coalition of national arts grant makers have come together to create an emergency initiative to offer financial and informational resources to artists across the United States. So whatever you can do, whatever you're able to donate or contribute, please head on over to artistrelief.org. If anything, not only do we want to build a collective for artists, but we also want to help artists at this point in time. So whatever you can pitch in or help out, please do. These are weird times for the arts, and it's not always helpful in terms of material for the show, but that's okay. We can still make it on by, especially when it comes to what exactly the arts are, which we'll get on that for our special 10th episode. Sebastian, where can the good people find you?
So when it comes to me, we have both Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is at Dr. Sebi, that is at DRSEBBY. And Twitter, it's also at Dr. Sebi with an underscore. So it's at DR_SEBBY. There you'll find me, as it states quite frankly on Twitter. I use it to post art and politically incorrect opinions for the sake of humor. It's gotten me far. But that's where you find me. But go ahead.
And for those of you that are looking for more of a newsy angle, very different from the film newsies, thankfully. You can find me on Twitter at ManciniRA. That's ManciniRA. And on Instagram, you can find me at ManciniRyan. That is where I will be sharing whatever the locals have to say about COVID-19, as well as watching Walter Jeffrey meltdown videos. Yeah, that's my time.
God, what a time to stay inside.
Yeah, just stay inside and watch a French bulldog scream his head off. It's life.
And like every single sorority girl will tell you, on 3, wash your hands. All right.
You've been listening to Mars on Life. Please make sure that you find us over on social media at Mars on Life Show on both Twitter and on Instagram. And on top of that, you can find this show on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Our artwork is done by Zachary Erberich, and our intro music is Space Explorers by Kevin MacLeod. I've been Ryan Mancini. My co-host, as always, is Sebastian Shug. And just remember, if you keep on going, you'll make it to Mars.